At Thanksgiving, my brother declared, "My younger sister is a disgrace to us all. She's never setting foot in my house." But at his wedding rehearsal a year later, his fiancée gasped when she saw me, bowed, and said, "Judge, I didn't expect to see you here." I never thought Jason and I would end up like this. Growing up in our four-bedroom colonial just outside Boston, we were actually close-ish despite the 4-year age gap. He taught me to ride a bike without training wheels when I was 6. I still have the scar on my knee from when I crashed into Mrs. Donovan's hydrangeas. Mom keeps threatening to throw out the embarrassing photo albums full of us in matching Christmas pajamas, but she never does. Somewhere along the way, maybe when I chose law school, instead of business like him, things started falling apart between us. Jason was always Dad's golden boy, baseball captain, investment club president, the kind of annoying teenager who started a Roth IRA with his summer job money while the rest of us were blowing our paychecks at the mall. Me? I was spirited, Dad's word, or argumentative, everyone else's. By 16, I'd watched enough Law, Order, to know I wanted to be a lawyer. My SAT prep tutor said I could argue with a brick wall and probably win. "Emma, are you seriously considering law school?" Jason asked during my senior year at BU. He'd already finished his MBA and wore button-downs even to Sunday brunch. "The market's completely oversaturated. You'll drown in debt for decades." I rolled my eyes so hard I nearly saw my own brain. "Thanks for the concern, but I've got it figured out." I didn't bother mentioning the scholarship I'd just received. Let him think he knew better. It was easier that way. Law school was when the real divide started between us. Jason bought his first condo at 26, while I lived with 3 roommates in a crumbling Cambridge apartment with mysterious stains on the kitchen ceiling. He dated a succession of glossy women who worked in finance or marketing. I spent weekends at legal aid clinics with my equally caffeine-addicted classmates, subsisting on ramen and righteous anger about the justice system. Family dinners became brutal. Him talking about property values and retirement accounts like some middle-aged financial advisor. Me ranting about systemic inequality and prison reform. Mom would frantically refill wine glasses while Dad cleared his throat and changed the subject to something safe, like whether the Sox had a chance this season. "I don't understand why you're working at that bleeding heart public defender's office when you graduated near the top of your class," Jason said once. We were clearing Thanksgiving dishes. This was years before the incident. "You could triple your salary at Harrington Pierce. They're still looking for associates." I scrubbed a gravy stain like it had personally offended me. "Not everything's about money, Jace." "Easy to say when you're borrowing from Mom and Dad for car repairs," he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. By 30, Jason was a senior manager with a corner office overlooking Boston Harbor. He'd embraced what he called traditional values, which mostly meant making obscene amounts of money, avoiding taxes, and saying increasingly problematic things at holiday gatherings. I was grinding away as an assistant DA, building a reputation as someone who didn't back down, not from opposing counsel, not from judges, and definitely not from my increasingly judgmental brother. Looking back, I should have seen the Thanksgiving incident coming from a mile away. Mom had been trying to keep peace between us for years with her desperate conversation redirects. "Jason, tell Emma about your trip to Nantucket." Or, "Emma, did you hear Jason's firm won that big contract?" Dad had basically given up, disappearing to his workshop whenever conversation veered toward anything remotely controversial. It was Mom who convinced me to come that year. "Jason's bringing his new girlfriend?" she said, her voice carrying that hopeful note I'd grown to dread. "Olivia something. He seemed serious about this one." "So that makes, what, 4 serious girlfriends in 3 years?" I couldn't help the snark. "Let me guess, she works in finance and has perfect hair." "Emma," Mom sighed, making me feel instantly guilty. "Can we just have one holiday without the sniping? Your father's blood pressure can't take another Parker sibling showdown." So I promised to behave and drove to my childhood home, mentally rehearsing safe conversation topics. Weather, food, the new Marvel movie. Nothing about politics, social justice, or economic policy. The house looked exactly the same colonial blue with white trim, Christmas wreaths already on the doors by mid-November because Mom could never wait. Dad hugged me at the door, smelling of aftershave and sawdust. "Your brother's already here," he said, taking my coat, "and his, lady friend." The slight hesitation told me everything I needed to know about Dad's opinion of Jason's new girlfriend. I found Mom in the kitchen, fussing over a turkey that smelled amazing. "Need help?" I asked, grabbing an apron. "Take these deviled eggs to the living room," she said, pushing a tray toward me. "And Emma? Try to find something nice to say about Olivia. She seems important to your brother." Olivia Hudson wasn't what I expected. For starters, she was Asian Americana, departure from Jason's usual blonde, country club type. She perched on our family sofa like it might bite her, wearing a cream cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But what struck me most was how young she looked. Mid-20s, maybe? Jason was 34. "Emma!" My brother stood, pulling me into one of those stiff hugs that's more for show than feeling. "This is Olivia." "Hi," I said, setting down the eggs. "Nice to meet you." "Emma's my little sister," Jason explained, emphasizing little like I was still in pigtails rather than pushing 40. "She works for the government." And there it was, the first dig, not even 5 minutes in. Like being a district court judge was some entry-level civil service job. The dinner itself was a masterclass in family tension. Mom fluttered around changing subjects whenever conversation veered toward danger. Dad talked about his workshop renovation in excruciating detail. Jason dominated with stories about his recent Tokyo business trip, each anecdote carefully crafted to showcase his importance. Olivia mostly smiled and nodded, occasionally touching Jason's arm when he got particularly animated. It wasn't until dessert that everything exploded. "So, Emma," Olivia said during a lull, "what kind of law do you practice?" It was the first direct question she'd asked me all evening. "I was a prosecutor for years," I said, cutting into Mom's pumpkin pie. "But recently I was appointed to the bench. I'm a district court judge now." "Oh," Olivia's eyes widened. "That's impressive. I actually considered law school before." "Emma's very committed to her causes," Jason interrupted, his voice carrying that edge I knew too well. "No matter what they cost the taxpayers." I took a slow sip of wine. "Public safety isn't a cause, Jason. It's a responsibility." "Right," he snorted. "Because letting criminals back on the streets with slaps on the wrist is all about public safety." Mom's fork clattered against her plate. "Jason, that's not fair. Your sister works very hard." "It's not about how hard she works, Mom. It's about the results. These liberal judges keep making decisions that hurt law-abiding citizens while coddling criminals." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dad stared at his pie like it contained the secrets of the universe. "You don't know anything about my decisions," I said quietly. "You've never once asked about my cases or my reasoning." "I don't need to," Jason shot back. "I read the papers. I see what's happening because of activist judges who think they know better than everyone else." Olivia looked increasingly uncomfortable, her eyes darting between us like she was watching a tennis match from hell. "Maybe," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the heat crawling up my neck. "If you spent less time worrying about your investment portfolio and more time understanding how the justice system actually works, you'd have a more informed opinion." Jason's face flushed red. "And maybe if you spent less time trying to save the world and more time building a real life of family, a home with actual equity, you wouldn't be so judgmental of people who make different choices." "Different choices?" I laughed. "You mean choices like voting to cut funding for public defenders and then complaining about crime rates?" "That's enough." Dad rarely raised his voice, so when he did, everyone froze. "This is Thanksgiving, for God's sake. Can we just eat pie without World War III?" A heavy silence fell. Mom's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Olivia studied her hands in her lap. And Jason's face had gone from red to an alarming shade of purple. "You know what?" he finally said, standing abruptly. "I'm done with this. My younger sister is a disgrace to us all. She's never setting foot in my house, and as far as I'm concerned, she's not welcome in my life either." Mom gasped. "Jason, you don't mean that." "I do mean it," he said, throwing his napkin onto the table. "Come on, Olivia. We're leaving." Without another word, my brother stormed out, a bewildered Olivia trailing behind after an apologetic glance at my parents. The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the windows, followed by the sound of Jason's BMW peeling out of the driveway. Dad put his head in his hands. Mom started crying quietly, and I sat there, still holding my fork, wondering how we'd gone from deviled eggs to disownment in less than 3 hours. I threw myself into work after that disaster. The courthouse became my sanctuary, the one place where conflicts had clear resolutions guided by law rather than decades of family history. My clerk started giving me concerned looks when she'd find me in chambers at 7 a.m. or 9 p.m., but she knew better than to ask questions. Diane Williams, my closest friend and fellow judge, wasn't so diplomatic. She cornered me in the courthouse cafeteria 3 weeks post-Thanksgiving. "All right, spill it," she said, stealing a fry from my untouched plate. "You've been walking around like someone died. Is it the Hernandez case? Because I told you to recuse yourself." "My brother disowned me," I blurted. "At Thanksgiving. Called me a disgrace to the family. Said I'm never welcome in his house again." Diane's eyebrows shot up. "The investment banker brother? The one with the stick up his?" "Consultant, but yeah, that one." She whistled low. "What happened?" I told her everything, the tension. Jason's disdain for my career, the argument that finally broke us. Saying it out loud made it sound both more dramatic and more petty than it had felt in the moment. "And your parents?" Diane asked. "There. Switzerland. Neutral territory. Mom calls every day but never mentions him. Dad sends me Red Sox articles like nothing happened." Diane nodded thoughtfully. "Families are weird. My sister and I didn't speak for 2 years after she started dating my ex." "What happened?" "She married him," Diane shrugged. "I gave a drunk, passive-aggressive toast at their wedding. Now we do Christmas and birthdays and pretend the whole thing never happened. That's family, the only people who can hurt you so badly and still expect you to show up for turkey next year." But Jason didn't expect me to show up for anything, and over the next few months, his absence became a physical thing, a Jason-shaped hole in conversations with my parents, in holiday plans, in family photos that now featured only 3 Parkers instead of 4. Then, something completely unexpected happened. Judge Campbell, this legendary figure who'd been a sort of mentor to me, stopped by my chambers one afternoon. "You've been noticed, Parker," he said without preamble, lowering his lanky frame into the chair opposite my desk. "Sir?" "The Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts. Justice Goldberg is retiring next month. Word is, your name's on the short list." My mouth went dry. The SJC was the highest court in Massachusetts, 7 justices who had the final say on interpreting state law. It was a career pinnacle most judges spent decades working toward, if they reached it at all. I don't know what to say." Campbell's weathered face cracked into a rare smile. "Say you'll accept if it comes. It's a long shot, you're young, and there are judges with decades more experience in the running. But the governor likes you, says you represent the future of jurisprudence in the Commonwealth." The vetting process was brutal. Every case I'd ever tried, every ruling I'd ever made, every paper I'd written in law school, all scrutinized under a microscope. The interviews themselves were marathon sessions designed to reveal my judicial philosophy and temperament. Through it all, a small, petty part of me kept thinking, wait until Jason hears about this. But of course, Jason wouldn't hear about it, not from me, anyway. 4 months had passed since Thanksgiving, and the silence between us was absolute. The day the governor's office called with the official nomination was the same day Mom left a hesitant voicemail. "Emma, honey, I wanted you to hear it from me first. Jason proposed to Olivia last weekend. They're planning a September wedding. I know things are difficult between you two right now, but I thought you should know." I sat at my desk, phone in hand, feeling the weird mix of professional triumph and personal loss. I'd just been nominated to the highest court in Massachusetts at 38, practically unheard of. And I had no one to share it with except my parents, who would inevitably dilute their pride in me with concern about the rift with Jason. The swearing-in ceremony was a blur of formal proceedings and congratulations. Mom cried through the whole thing. Diane whooped inappropriately when I took the oath. My law school mentor flew in from Chicago. Even my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Petrovich, came, despite her arthritis, bringing homemade cookies that she insisted sustained better judgments. The only person conspicuously absent was my brother. Mom had told him about my appointment. I could see it in her eyes when she hugged me afterward, that mixture of happiness for me and sadness for what was missing. He said, "Congratulations," she offered weakly, and we both knew it was a lie. 7 months later, an embossed ivory envelope arrived in my mail. "Jason Parker and Olivia Hudson request the honor of your presence." I stared at it for a long time before calling Mom. "Did you know about this?" I asked without preamble. "About the invitation?" "Yes," Mom admitted. "I may have suggested it would be appropriate." "Mom, he called me a disgrace to the family. He said I'd never set foot in his house again." "People say things they don't mean when they're angry, Emma. It's been almost a year. He hasn't called, texted, or emailed once. And now I'm supposed to show up and smile in family photos like nothing happened?" Mom was quiet for a moment. "Your father and I, we're not getting any younger. Is this really how you want things to be? Separate holidays? Taking turns visiting us so you don't have to see each other? What happens when we're gone?" It was the first time she'd been so blunt about it, and it hit me like a physical blow. The invitation sat on my counter for 2 weeks while I debated what to do. In the end, it wasn't Mom's guilt trip that swayed might, was Diane. "Go," she said simply, when I showed her the invitation over lunch. "Not for him, for you. So you don't wake up 10 years from now wondering if that could have been the moment things changed." I checked "Will attend" on the RSVP card and dropped it in the mail before I could change my mind. That evening, I got a text from Mom. "Thank you, sweetheart. This means so much to your father and me." Nothing from Jason, naturally. The rehearsal dinner was at this fancy restaurant in Boston's Seaport District. I left work early, changed in my office bathroom, and gave myself a pep talk in the mirror. "You are Justice Emma Parker of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. You've faced down hardened criminals and aggressive attorneys. You can handle one dinner with your emotionally constipated brother." As I drove to the restaurant, I practiced what I'd say. "Congratulations" was safe. "I'm happy for you" was pushing it but still appropriate. "Sorry it took a wedding invitation to get me to speak to you again after you called me a family disgrace" was probably off the table. I parked and sat in my car for a minute, breathing deeply. Through the restaurant windows, I could see well-dressed people mingling with champagne glasses. Somewhere in there was my brother, the person who'd taught me to ride a bike, helped me with math homework, and then decided I wasn't worthy of being in his life. "For Mom and Dad," I whispered, grabbing my purse and a hastily wrapped gift. "Just get through tonight." The host directed me to a private room at the back. With each step, my heart beat faster. I hadn't seen Jason in almost a year. What would I say? What would he say? Would we acknowledge the elephant in the room or pretend it didn't exist? I paused at the doorway, scanning the room. My parents stood near the bar, Mom already teary-eyed. Dad nursed what looked like scotch. Various relatives and friends clustered in small groups, many faces familiar from previous family gatherings. And then I saw him, Jason, looking relaxed in a tailored suit, his arm around a petite woman in a champagne-colored dress who I assumed was Olivia. They were talking to a tall guy who must have been the best man, or a groomsman. I took a deep breath and stepped into the room. Mom spotted me first, her face lighting up as she hurried over. "You came," she whispered, hugging me too tight. "Thank you." Dad joined us, kissing my cheek. "You look beautiful, Emma." "Thanks, Dad." I glanced around nervously. "Have you seen? Is Jason?" "He knows you're coming," Mom assured me. "He's over there with Olivia. Why don't you go say hello?" I nodded, steeling myself. Better to get it over with quickly. I started making my way through the room, smiling politely at relatives who did double takes when they recognized me. Apparently, news of the Parker sibling feud had made the family rounds. I was halfway across the room when Olivia spotted me. The reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Her mouth fell open slightly, her eyes widened, and she froze mid-conversation. Then she did something completely unexpected. She bowed her head slightly, almost a gesture of deference, and said something to Jason, who turned to follow her gaze. When he saw me, his expression cycled through surprise, discomfort, and something else I couldn't identify. But it was Olivia who approached me first, moving with purpose while Jason remained rooted to the spot. "Judge Parker," she said when she reached me, her voice carrying a note of respect that caught me completely off guard. "I didn't expect to see you here." Time seemed to stop. "Judge Parker? How did she?" "I'm sorry," I managed. "Have we met before? In court, perhaps?" My mind raced through recent cases, trying to place her face. Olivia's eyes widened further, darting between me and Jason, who was now approaching with an expression somewhere between confusion and alarm. "You don't? Oh, I'm Olivia Hudson. I'm an attorney with Brennan and Associates. I appeared before you in the Garfield construction case about 6 months ago, the workers' compensation dispute." It clicked. The Garfield case, a complicated workers' comp issue involving immigrant laborers injured on a construction site. The defense attorney had been a young woman, fiercely prepared and articulate. "Olivia Hudson, of course." "Ms. Hudson," I said, recognition dawning. "You represented the defense. That was excellent work." Jason reached us, his face a study in conflicting emotions. "You two know each other?" he asked, looking between us like we were speaking a foreign language. "Your sister, I mean. Judge Parker presided over one of my cases last year," Olivia explained, still looking bewildered. "Jason, you never told me your sister was Justice Emma Parker of the SJC." Jason's mouth opened and closed several times. "I didn't know you'd been promoted to the Supreme Judicial Court." His voice sounded strangled. A heavy silence fell between us. The rehearsal dinner chatter continued around us, oblivious to our little drama triangle. "It was about 7 months ago," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "After Thanksgiving." Olivia glanced between us, clearly sensing the tension but not fully understanding its source. "Well," she said brightly, "this is wonderful. Jason's sister is one of the most respected young jurists in Massachusetts. I actually cited your ruling in the Mendez case in a brief last month." My brother looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Here was his fiancée woman he was about to marry, singing the praises of the same career he'd dismissed as worthless, the same choices he'd called a disgrace. Later that night, after awkward conversations and even more awkward toasts, Jason pulled me aside near the coat check. "Supreme Judicial Court," he said, his voice low. "That's impressive." "Thank you." I shifted, clutching my purse strap. "Congratulations on your engagement. Olivia seems wonderful." "She is." A pause. "She never told me she'd appeared in your court. She probably didn't make the connection. Parker is a common name. Or maybe she did, and she didn't want to bring it up because she knew about, you know." He gestured vaguely between us. "The part where you called me a disgrace to the family?" I supplied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Jason winced. "I was angry. I said things I shouldn't have." "You said things you meant, Jason." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. "I meant that I was frustrated by what I saw as your choices. I didn't mean that you were actually what I said." "Your fiancée seems to think those choices weren't so bad," I observed. "She cited my ruling in a brief." "Olivia didn't tell me she knew you professionally," Jason admitted. "Though, to be fair, I haven't exactly brought you up in conversation this past year." "So why invite me to the wedding? Was it Mom's idea?" "It was Olivia's, actually," he said, surprising me. "She said that whatever happened between us, we were still family, and she didn't want to start our marriage with a family divided." I agreed, but I wasn't sure you'd come. "I almost didn't," I admitted. The wedding itself was surprisingly healing. I sat in the family section like Jason had asked, watched my brother say his vows, had an entire table of Olivia's lawyer friends ask for my judicial opinions during the reception. Mom cried approximately 17 times. When it was time for them to leave, Jason hugged me for real, not one of those stiff, formal hugs, but the kind we used to share as kids. "Thank you," he whispered, "for coming, for giving me another chance." "That's what family does," I told him, surprised to find I meant it. The next morning, I woke to a text from Jason. Breakfast when we get back from honeymoon? There's a new place near your courthouse. Olivia says their coffee will change your life. I smiled at my phone. Only if you promise not to critique my judicial philosophy over pancakes, I texted back. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, deal. Though no promises about your fashion choices, those robes do nothing for you. Just like that, we were brother and sister again. Not the same as before, maybe better in some ways, more careful in others, but connected. Sometimes the most unexpected paths lead us back to where we need to be.